that's something really important to realize, especially for the calorie counters out there. So many times you think, oh, well, I've had enough calories. Why? I chose the frozen yogurt, but I just want more and more. Because with sugar, the more you eat, the more you want.
So you're having a 250, 300 calorie smoothie. So in your mind, you're like, this is great. This is so healthy. This is low cal. This doesn't have a lot of fat in it. But you're having 55 grams of sugar. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's more than a Coca-Cola.
Battling food and your body doesn't work. You want to love and accept yourself. And because you're insatiable, you want results too. And wouldn't you know, you bring the same intensity to your life, wanting to maximize your time, potential, and experiences you have here on this beautiful and wondrous planet Earth. Fair warning, it will be a roller coaster, but for those insatiable, that's your prime time to thrive. We're here to say yes to the hunger of wanting it all. I'm your co-host, Ali Shapiro, a health coach who helps people end the losing battle of dieting and find a truce with food.
And I'm Juliette Berg, nutritionist, fitness expert, and the co-owner of Unite Fitness Studio franchise.
Hello, insatiable listeners. Welcome to episode 34, Anatomy of a Sugar Craving. Today, we're going to talk about what sugars are bad and why. And hey, salty people, you're not off the hook. You'll find out why salty and sugar cravings are often the same. Number 2, how to start to get off sugar for good. And it's not going to be what you think. And finally, we're going to discuss the question you have to ask yourself to get to the emotional root of why you feel addicted to sugar. Here we go with episode 34. Hello, insatiable listeners. It's Ali here. If you tune in here, you get that diets are a losing battle. But are you equally afraid if you give up, you'll blow up? Fortunately, there's a better way, and it's called a truce with food. Because here's what you already know. When you struggle with food, you struggle with life. As Candace from Pennsylvania, a past Truce with Food participant said, Truce with Food is not just a plan, but a life-saving journey. So here's what we do in the program, which starts this September. We stop the sabotage cycle. We get to the root of bad eating, and most importantly, we figure out what food combinations work for you. Get the first lesson free and find out which is the better diet for weight loss, vegetarian, Mediterranean, or paleo. Log on to alishapiro.com and find out.
Sugar, dun, 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 dun. Oh, honey, honey. Hey, Ali.
You are my candy girl. And you got me
wanting you. Who doesn't want sugar?
I know. And for all you salty people out there, realize that chips, pizza, and pretzels are really processed sugar when it breaks down in the body.
What are you? Are you salty or sweet?
Oh my God, I am sweet. Let me tell you the funniest story that's kind of infamous in our family. So I was 5 years old and I decided that I was going to go visit my aunt and uncle in Ohio, which was like an hour away. And I was away for a week. And I told them that I wanted to get my sister a present for when I returned. And they're like, okay, what do you want to, get her? And I was like, double stuffed Oreos. So I bought her this like giant, right? We give people what we want bag, and it's a bag of double stuffed Oreos, and it sat on the counter. But as the week went on, I started like eating them here and there. And so there was like one sleeve left, and and we had a 45-minute drive, right, from Steubenville, Ohio to Pittsburgh. And by the time I got to my sister, there was one left. And I said to my sister's name's Julie, I'm like, I said, Julie, I brought a present for you.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, here's an Oreo. Can we split it?
Oh my God, you bitch.
I love sugar. Like I just feel like that represents so much of how I felt about sugar for so long.
I mean, but the Oreo is supposed to be one of the most addictive processed foods out there.
Oh my God. And it was double stuffed.
And double stuffed. Wow.
Yeah. What about you? Are you?
I'm sweet. Yeah. But if you put salty and sweet together, it's like the devilish combination where you really can't stop, like a dark chocolate covered pretzel or something.
Oh yeah. Or like almonds with dark chocolate sea salt.
Yes. That's an evil, evil combination.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the quality, but yeah, totally. So what we want to do today in this anatomy of a sugar craving is really like, break it down and not just tell you why sugar is bad, because I think we all know on some level. We're going to go into it a little bit deeper, but also what to do about it, because I think that's probably what's most helpful and useful. So Juliet, you talked about Oreos being really addicting. What about some of the studies you were mentioning right before we got on about what physically happens in the body when we should first define sugar, because, I might have thrown the salty people off for a second. What? I like salt. But we're talking about how sugar breaks down in the body and how the body registers it. Correct?
Yeah. So anything that is a processed or refined carbohydrate, like a salty potato chip, or, she'd mentioned pizza. So that's, white flour, and flour is refined. It's a powder, version of the grain. So the way that your body is breaking that down is the sugars, carbohydrates break down into sugar, and those sugars are absorbing very quickly into the body. So they're simple carbohydrates, in the same way that a tablespoon of sugar is also a simple carbohydrate. So your body is registering those certain salty foods like potato chips or like a slice of pizza, except there is a good thing that there's cheese on pizza, right, Allie, for blood sugar. But
yeah.
But at the end of the day, the way that your body is recognizing these foods is as something that is increasing your insulin levels and throwing your blood sugar out of whack.
And it really increases your insulin when the carb is stripped of its nutrients. So this is why, we did an episode called Good and Bad Carbs. There are good carbohydrates out there, but they have vitamins with them. They have minerals with them. The kind of carbs we're talking and sugar we're talking about that's really addicting is just the sugar part. There's no vitamin B, vitamin E, nothing with it. And so as much it's that, it's also, and then it also is the traditional sweets that we think about: Oreos, Skittles, frozen yogurt, that kind of stuff. So let's just make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah. And I mean, the more processed carbohydrates, the factory made cookies, cakes, candies, Oreo cookies in Pennsylvania, tasty cakes, those kinds of foods are chocked full of so many chemicals and preservatives, but also this perfect ratio of sugar, fat, and salt. And if you look at a lot of those foods, there's a ton of sodium in them. And when you're eating it, you're not saying, oh, this is really salty, because it's so covered up by the amount of sugar that's in there. But there really is that ratio of sugar and salt in there that just keeps you wanting more and more. And there's actually been a lot of studies. One really famous study in particular was done on rats, and they were basically put in a maze and given the choice of hanging out near rice cakes or Oreos. The tastiest sandwich cookies won the popularity contest, obviously. Those results were compared to a different test where the rats were given the choice of loitering in an area of a maze where they were injected with saline, or in another corner where they could get a shot of cocaine or morphine. And the rats in the study liked the cookies about just as much as they liked the drugs. So they were all congregating near the cookie side of the maze as much as they would on the drug side.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. Like, take that in for a second. I think we think because sugar is everywhere and legal that it's a lot more benign than it really is.
For sure. I mean, I don't know about you, Allie. I've never tried crack cocaine, but but I have definitely eaten a lot of Oreos in my life. Now
and I felt better about myself, more moral eating the Oreos than the cocaine, but I don't know if I really could have, if I really should have judged myself better.
And also, just like humans really like the delicious creamy center of the cookie, the rats would break it open and they would eat the middle first.
Interesting.
They liked the white cream more.
Yeah.
So bizarre.
Yeah. And there's so many studies out there about how this lights up the reward, that how carbs specifically, and food manufacturers know this, like that ratio that Juliet was talking about has been highly studied, highly fine-tuned. This is not an accident, right? I mean, if you're a food company, how do you increase profits? You have to get people to eat more. And believe it or not, hunger, actually, when you eat real food, you can't make people hungrier if you're actually eating healthier food. So the way that you make people hungrier is you alter the food ratio combinations in quote unquote foods. Because again, these are products, not food. So you make products that will, basically bypass the natural appetite control in the body so that you continue to eat more. And I think that's something really important to realize, especially for the calorie counters out there. so many times you think, oh, well, I've had enough calories. Why? I chose the frozen yogurt, but I just want more and more. Because with sugar, the more you eat, the more you want, because it continues to give you that flood of energy. There's a lot of more biology to it. But basically, what you need to know is the more sugar you eat, the more you want. So you're not going to ever feel satisfied from it, because it in and of itself is not a whole food. So your body doesn't really recognize it. I think that's an easier way of explaining why that happens. So that's kind of immediate response. One of my favorite analogies for people to understand what's happening internally comes from Dr. Oz. And he used this I think 10 years ago. He talks about that when you eat things, processed carbs, they break down into the body, and that sugar coalesces like shard-like glass. So it all comes together like glass, and it nicks at you on the inside. And that causes inflammation. And we are going to do a whole episode on what the hell is inflammation, because we need to go into that in some detail. But when you have those chronic cuts, your body is basically inflamed at a low grade level. Think of a fire, a low grade fire. It's not a raging fire. That's cancer, that's autoimmune issues, but it's more low grade. And it takes longer to repair your muscles after workouts like that. It increases your body temperature, which makes sleeping more difficult. It makes you also more inflamed, which we know makes weight loss harder.
Constipation or irritable bowel.
Yeah, all those kind of things are often causes inflammation. So sugar really accelerates that and keeps that low grade fire going. So on an immediate level, it makes it a lot harder to control cravings and hunger. And on a long-term level, it really sets you up for health issues and stubborn weight loss. So
how do you know if you're addicted to sugar? Or right, is that what we want to say? Is it an addiction, right? Because I have so many clients who come to work with me, and I say, what do you think is holding you back from weight loss? And they'll say, it's my addiction to sugar. 9 out of 10 times that's what I get.
Yeah. Because I tend to look at everything holistically. I don't believe in addiction wholeheartedly. I do think some people are wired differently, right? We all know everyone's different, but I think everything is multifactorial. So I think probably on a physical level, are they eating the right foods for them?
I mean, I think they have a dependency on these sweet foods, right? They're depending on them. And we'll talk about that more in this podcast. Like, why would you depend on these things, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a reason why we need them. But there's a softer way, I think, to approach it, instead of just like putting our hands up and being like, I'm addicted, which is saying that you really have no control and you're powerless.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I also think addiction it's like the problem is addiction, but I actually think processed carbs are the solution. So what I mean by that is we turn to them when we're not eating the right foods for us, and there's emotional stuff that we'll get into. So I think they're actually the solution to underlying problems and not themselves. So I think it may feel like you're addicted, like you can't just stop. But to your point, there's a softer way to approach this that's more empowering. I like that you said that. Yeah, addiction does feel like, woo, but it can be. I mean, that's the thing. You do have to definitely put effort into it.
But it's not all about the physiological response that's happening. That's definitely part of it. But there's a big emotional component to why we would be depending on sugar as well. Where do we want to start with this first for our listeners?
Yeah, let's start with the physical, because I have found in 10 years of working with clients and also my own journey that if you can't get the physical piece down, the emotional piece is so hard. And I have yet to find a client who, once they figure out how to balance their blood sugar, they don't find that 50% of their quote emotional eating clears up. Because the physical and emotional, even though we're separating them here, they are so interconnected. So for example, when your blood sugar is crashing, which is when you're craving carbs, your mood goes down, you get more tired, right? So and you think about food more because your body registers it as, oh my God, a famine. We got to go find food. So you think about food a lot more. So when you are actually physically not having cravings, you just make life a lot easier for yourself, and your emotions get very clear. It's like, because you're not bouncing around and all this stuff, like it becomes a lot more clear how you're feeling, because it's hard to identify your emotions. So I think starting with the physical is the best place for people, just to make life easier and to build some of that confidence, because I find with a lot of my clients, they just have such low confidence because they think they've tried everything, but they tend to have tried a similar approach, just dressed up differently. But, always listening to the external expert rather than their body. And so they think like, oh no, I just love carbs, or I just can't resist them, when it's like, no, that's a symptom, a real physical symptom.
So what are some of the things that we can do to start dealing with the physical?
Yeah. So I'm always about figuring out your blood sugar. And I will say this
every episode.
I know. And I was reading Oprah magazine, and Gayle King did an interview with Tom Hanks. Like, she always asked in the section, she has different people that she asks things. And she was like, Tom, what advice would you give your younger self? And he was like, to learn about blood sugar control.
Really?
Yeah, he has type 2 diabetes.
Oh.
I think it's type 2. I know he has diabetes. I'm not quite sure what kind. I'm assuming it's. So I was like, oh my God, finally. It's maybe now that a celebrity says it, everyone will listen. But it's very true. People think only diabetics, but if you have, PMS, hormonal issues, PCOS, cravings, hunger, trouble sleeping, that means your blood sugar is out of balance.
Basically, if you're a human being
in the 21st century,
you should just be aware of how your body's metabolism is working throughout the day.
Yeah. And really what blood sugar you have to figure out is, what are the amount of carbs, proteins, and fats that I need for my metabolism. I call this your metabolic typing. And actually, I have a new opt-in on my website to help you start to figure out what if you do better on vegetarian, Mediterranean, or paleo. It's all a continuum, but those tend to be, if you could start there and figure out if those are good for you, you can then tweak from there. So
basically, higher carb, moderate carb, lower carb.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, I think a lot of the people that we see in the media who are health celebrities, they tend to be the type of people who do better on higher carbohydrate diets. They're long and lean, and they're like, oh, I'm vegetarian, or I'm vegan, or something that tends to be lighter foods. And then everyone tries to emulate that because they're like, well, they're thin, right? But it's like, that works for their body type. So it's really important to figure out. And I think one of the other important things is to start to do, even if that is a process to figure out your metabolic type. But the first thing, maybe even before that, is do a sugar audit of how many processed carbs you're actually eating in a day. And we talked about this on the moderation episode, but I think it's important to repeat here, is that 4 grams of sugar is like 1 packet of sugar. So when you start looking at your food labels and looking in unsuspecting places, ketchup, dressings, even your fortified cereals, right? Granolas, all of these quote unquote health foods, your low fat yogurt that has added, fruit in it, those are like the worst, right? People think they're so healthy. Start looking at how many sugars are in those foods and really start to get an idea, because you can't change until you're aware of how much extra sugar you're eating and probably why you feel hungry all the time and feel powerless over it. So I think that would probably be the sugar audit is the first step.
Yeah. And one of the things that I recommend to my clients when you are looking to buy packaged foods, whether it be dressings, so if it's a dressing or a sauce, I would say that you really want to aim to have the sugars be less than 5 grams per serving. And for a dressing, a serving is really only usually 2 tablespoons, right? So that's why less than 5 grams. If it's a lot higher than that, then most of us are using more than 2 tablespoons when we're putting dressing on a salad. So you're ending up with a lot. For things like a pasta sauce, like a tomato sauce, the same thing, less than 5 grams. Tomatoes are sweet as is, so there really shouldn't be added sugar in a sauce. If anything, if you can find a tomato sauce that doesn't have sugar as an additive at all, that's great. And there are plenty of them out there. And then for other things like yogurts, cereal, granolas, I would say less than 10 grams of sugar per serving. And you obviously want it to be 1 serving for whatever you're using.
Yeah. And I think for the salty people, it's a little bit trickier because they may have no sugars in them. But if you look at the amount of carbohydrates compared to fiber, you'll see the emptiness of the carbohydrates. So if it has a serving of 32 grams of carbs, and then there's like 1 gram of fiber, you pretty much know that they've removed any of the nutrition. I mean, that's how I eyeball it.
Yeah, definitely. I look at the fiber a lot in relation to the total carbohydrates.
Yeah, because fiber will slow that blood sugar response down. It'll keep you fuller and satiated longer. So yeah, those are good amounts. And I also think too, people need to look at like fruit drinks and fruit smoothies. And it's so interesting. Like all these people are getting into smoothies, but they're adding a ton of fruit, very little vegetables. Then they'll add like vanilla yogurt, vanilla almond milk. And before you know it, you have just basically, you'd be better off eating ice cream with
full fat.
With full fat, yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd like it better, right? And so, I mean, this is so important. I think why the audit is just to bring awareness, not to judge yourself, but just to be like, oh my God, because let me tell you, most people who think they're eating healthy don't realize this is happening.
Because just if you're having a 250, 300 calorie smoothie. So in your mind, you're like, this is great. This is so healthy. This is low cal. This doesn't have a lot of fat in it, but you're having 55 grams of sugar. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's more than a Coca-Cola.
Yeah. And that's like, I'm trying to do the quick math here. That's like 14 packets pretty much.
Yeah. And that's just, you have, all you need to do that is like Ali was saying, some, vanilla yogurt, 1 banana, some berries, and some almond milk, you're there.
Yeah. And people might be thinking, well, those are natural sugars. Fruit is a natural sugar, right? There is not sugar added to yogurt naturally. And it's okay to have natural sugars, but usually in nature, the foods that have natural sugars also have lots of fiber with them too. And so that's really important. I think another food I'm thinking about, I remember I used to buy dried cranberries from Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. And last time I checked in both places, they had added cane sugar to them. And I don't buy them anymore. I'm so disappointed. And they added sunflower oil. But so these seemingly health foods, like I always still have to check because formulas are changing all the time. So really just become aware. Give yourself a week to just like, whoa, look at that. And then start to figure out, I think too, with the metabolic typing, most people are deficient in fat. Like hands down, right? Like they're doing low or no fat yogurt for breakfast or egg whites. And then at lunch, they're sticking their dressing in their fork in dressing, right? Instead of like actually having the dressing over the salad. So I think that's another great place.
What about for the weekend warriors? What I mean by this is those of us who eat really low sugar Monday through Friday. How do we gauge like the weekends and overall in the week, you know what I mean? Like we're saying, okay, every day kind of take, see how much sugar you're having on a daily basis. But what if, Friday through Sunday is a shit show?
Yeah. I mean, there's been some, I don't want to botch what the study said, but there's some data I'm pretty sure that's out there that shows that's actually worse for you than just being consistently because of the shock to the system.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think what happens then, think about it. So if it's just, you're like, I'm going crazy, right? Then Monday comes and all of a sudden your blood sugar is going to drop so drastically because I always use the example of like an IV drip for your blood sugar, right? So like if you've been going crazy all weekend, that IV bag is like used to being like full, like, and so your body starts getting adjusted to getting all those fluids. And then if all of a sudden you cut back, all of a sudden your body's like, wait, where? And that's when that's when they're good from Monday until like Wednesday, or they start getting cravings at night. So I think it's really, that's where the emotional piece comes in, right?
And alcohol, we didn't really touch on, but alcohol is sugar.
Oh my God, especially the mixed drinks. Yeah. And we should also talk about diet sodas. In fact, I just saw a study that came out today that there are finally, more and more evidence is mounting that our diet sodas, artificial sweeteners actually make you hungrier and they alter your gut bacteria. So you're not getting away with anything with those either, unfortunately.
So is there anything that we can have that's sweet, right? Because human beings, we have our taste buds. We're meant to taste salty, sweet, bitter. There's a reason for all of this.
Yeah, yeah. So I recommend to my clients, and I'd be curious what you'd recommend to yours, Juliet. But I think, again, I'm a naturalist, so I think if it comes in nature, so honey is a great food. Yes, it has a little bit of a higher glycemic index, but we also know that the glycemic index now is unique to each individual. So I think honey is a great one. Maple syrup
But let's clarify, right? Because not all honey, not all maple syrup is going to be the right kind.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I don't like to overwhelm people. I like to meet them where they are. So if they're first just trying to clean up their diets, I'm like, don't worry about the exact honey. You can go to the honey aisle and there's like 80 different kinds, right?
But I would say just look at the label, make sure that the ingredients is just honey, right? We can't assume that it's just honey nowadays, or maple syrup is just maple syrup, because these companies like to be cheap, and they like to like have a little bit of honey, but they also like to have a little corn syrup in there too.
Great point. I thought you meant like raw versus.
No, just to read the label.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's why I like shopping at farmers markets, because you can usually find the pure good stuff. And then I also, coconut sugar isn't quite as natural, but I find it to be really helpful for people, and it can be replaced 1-to-1 in baking. So that's what I always recommend for people. I used to, when I first started out, I thought agave was really good, but it's now come out that especially, it really mirrors the chemical structure of high fructose corn syrup. So,
and that also just says like just how much little we know, right? So at this point, we're saying honey, maple syrup, coconut sugar, those are all natural things. But who knows, 2 years from now, a study might come out and say something like, about coconut sugar, just in the same way that agave is. So with any of these things, we can't abuse them.
For sure. And also, though, honey and maple syrup really do come directly, right? Agave, you have to extract it from the same plant as tequila. Coconut sugar, you're doing some extraction. I mean, honey and maple syrup, I feel like no matter what we learn, we always learn that we need to be in concert with our environment. Like that is what has just been proven. And that's what traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic has known for thousands of years. But I love that you bring that point up, because these sweeteners, like stevia, for example, it was really helpful for me when I was cutting back on sugar, but I don't do it anymore because there's some things that I'm kind of iffy about. There's the green stevia, which is better than the white stevia, but the green stevia is hard to find. And I don't know. What do you feel about stevia?
I would love to have an expert come on and talk a little bit more about stevia, because I'm not an expert, right? And I was actually recently listening to a podcast with this Dr. Axe, which I would love to have him on the show. I'm definitely going to reach out to him and try to have him on here. But he was talking about stevia and the different qualities of stevia, because Truvia isn't stevia. I mean, it's a combination of stevia and erythritol, which is a sugar alcohol.
Which gas.
Yeah. Well, they say erythritol doesn't cause digestive discomfort, but everyone's different, right? I know for me, maltitol sends me into a fart storm. I can't, some people it doesn't bother them, but I can't. Xylitol, maltitol, all of those things, are awful. I can't really chew gum, it's just, but erythritol is supposed to be one that's a little bit calmer on the system. And you're going to find that a lot in these low calorie, no sugar ice creams. Like Halo Top ice cream is like a crazy fad right now. Every Whole Foods you go to, it's sold out. Because
I've never even heard of it.
It's ice cream, but I'm guessing that it's a much less skim milk, because to get the calorie count down, they can't have it be a heavy cream. Although it says there's cream in the ingredients don't make sense to me, because they say eggs, cream, and erythritol and stevia, and then whatever else. To equal a pint being 240 calories, the equations don't add up to me, so I'm not really sure how that works. I was thinking about emailing them and being like, can you explain how this works to me? Because
it could be like the case of Pirate Booty. Did you hear about what happened to them all those years ago?
No.
This woman was on Weight Watchers, and she was like allotting her points, and Pirate Booty counted as like, she used the point calculators based on the calories that they gave, and it turned out they had completely like misled, and she sued them, won all this money, and donated it all to like obesity research.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, labels aren't perfect. There's not a lot of regulation on stuff. There was a salad dressing that I noticed that randomly went from like 30 calories per 2 tablespoons to like 100 and something, and I was like, whoa, what happened here? They obviously fucked up,
Yeah.
It happens.
What I think too, I mean, what's this ice cream that's on Hilltop?
Halo Top.
Halo Top. I think this is what cracks me up about like when I go to Whole Foods. Like, just because it's in Whole Foods does not mean it's healthy per se.
Or any health food store.
Or any health food store. I mean, I'm thinking a great substitute my clients like that's super cheap too is to take a frozen banana, put it some plain almond milk or any milk substitute that doesn't have sugar. Throw a little bit of peanut butter in it. If you're allergic to peanuts, do sunflower seed butter, a little bit of ice cubes, blend it up in a blender, put a little couple of chocolate shavings in it. And that's like cheap and is going to be lower calorie than whatever is going on in
but not lower sugar. And I think that's the thing what's happening with these companies that are promoting, these sugar-free made with stevia products. And there's a coconut, So Delicious has one as well, which is a sugar-free coconut ice cream. I think that people are excited because sugar is the new hot thing to like get out of our diets to help us lose weight and burn fat. And so people are like, well, shouldn't I do that versus a 30 gram of sugar banana?
Well, and that's interesting because then that brings up, why are we judging things just by calories and grams, right? Because to me, food is information and you can't it's not just a caloric or even a gram. It provides a lot more information, to your point, that we don't even know right now. Like we will never know the full extent of what is in a banana. But I think the important thing from a mindset standpoint is if you are using these things, I call them bridge foods. Like they're to help you as you work on your emotions and clean up your diet to eventually not need them. Like they aren't a forever food, but you do have to be where you are. I mean, I used all those kind of things. I eventually got to the point where I love Alana's Pantry because she does a lot of low glycemic recipes that have like almond flour or coconut flour. So they're still blood sugar balanced for most people. So I would recommend that to people if you need something. Try to do something homemade and you'll appreciate it more.
Yeah. You'll save a lot of money because those ice creams out there are really not cheap. It's because it's costing the company a lot to make something that is somewhat tasty.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I mean, I don't do ice cream that well, but sometimes I will do it anyways. And I would pay less for like an organic, regular ice cream over those low sugar substitutes. Cause you need the fat, right?
The problem with those substitutes is oftentimes people don't know how to regulate. And so, this pint is only 240 calories and they eat the whole pint.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I think in their mind, they're sacrificing somehow, right? Like, oh, well, this isn't the real thing. And to that point, and that's what we were talking about earlier, the more sugar you eat, even if it's artificial or sugar-free, the more you want, especially if it's not balanced with fat. I thought of another sweetener that's out there that's really popular in the keto community is Swerve. My sister has that at home because she
never heard of this. What is that?
I don't know what it is. My mom has cooked with it. I just don't really like it. So she had like made this keto cake and it had like the icing with the Swerve and it just tastes different to me. So I don't really like it. I should have probably done more research, but I know it's for sometimes when people who are on keto and trying to stay under their carb grams. And some people have to be on it for truly medical issues. So it can be really helpful for that. But that's another one that's pretty new. I think it has like the sugar alcohols in it, probably.
It says there's no digestive intolerance, no laxative effect with Swerve. But everything is so new. There's 5 grams of 5 grams of erythritol. Okay, so it's I think it's erythritol. That's what it is. That's what Swerve is.
Oh, okay.
So it's erythritol, and then you're going to see a lot of always fiber with this stuff. They always put a lot of fiber in with all of these products to like keep it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is all really new, right? In the same way that when aspartame came out, Sweet and Low came out, those were new at some point too. We didn't know that they were causing cancer and inflammation. And in the same way that we don't really have enough research to say that your Truvia or your erythritol isn't harming you. So you just have to, I think it's really important not to overdo it with these things.
Yeah. And really know what moderation is.
And like Ali was saying, natural, you don't have to be afraid of natural. You don't have to be afraid of a banana or maple syrup or honey. These are things from the universe.
Yeah. From nature. She's so wonderful. So, but I think the big issue then is that once you get to that physical place, then you've got to look at the emotional stuff because no amount of sugar alcohols are going to give you the emotional satisfaction of why you turn to that. So this is another reason why I think it's the solution, not a problem. So let's talk about some of the emotional stuff and the emotional, like what were some of the emotional reasons, Juliet, that you discovered you were turning to sugar?
Feeling very overwhelmed from my day. And, it's still something that I've been struggling with. And, I'm not perfect with this sugar thing. I definitely still turn to sugar. And I think that it's when I have a day where I haven't had really much time to breathe or just let everything kind of sink in and I've just been going nonstop. And then sugar is a very calming food for me. That's how it acts in my system, where it's like okay, a little sugar. Now I can relax.
Well, I think you bring up something interesting because most of us, when we turn to sugar, we feel down, right? Overwhelmed, down. And sugar brings us back up to that normal, which is relaxed, right? It's like, and it does kind of have a numbing out effect, especially if you eat enough of it, for sure.
Yeah, it's rewarding. It feels rewarding. And I know sometimes you're like, I've had a really hard fucking day and I deserve something to make me feel good right now.
Yeah. I like that you said right now because it makes you feel
right now.
But in the moment,
like
the next day you wake, I remember so many times waking up in the next morning being like, oh, I'm so bad at myself, and like,
or even right after you have that feeling, you eat it and you're like, really? Why did you just do that?
It's already over. I'm so mad. It's already over. Yeah, I found. There were many reasons. I hear from a lot of my clients the deeper in that they get to why they turn to food in general. It is this. I was just with a client yesterday, and she was like, "It's just this sheer vulnerability of the moment. It isn't one particular situation scenario. It's like when you're like to your point when you were saying feeling overwhelmed, and it's when you're." And she was describing that. For her, vulnerability almost meant like she didn't feel like it's not even control, but it's the term agency that I use all the time in Truths of Food of like, you don't need to be able to control everything, but you need to know you have options in that moment to alleviate some of those feelings. And I think that's oftentimes why most people turn to carbs. I don't know if they would use those specific words you're using, overwhelm, but I think it's so important for people to get clear on what overwhelm means, because that overwhelm, stress, I deserve this. Like you need to get clearer on the emotions so you can then be like, this is what I'm doing so that I can find a real substitute for it. Because as we were chatting before we started here, sugar and carbs, they're a symbolic substitute for reward.
Yeah. And I think going back to the thing about getting rewarded at the end of the day, I would also say that for me, it was such a habit that it became an end cap to my day. So I would just know that that's the way that my day is ending. I end it with dessert. It's an end cap.
It's the ritual.
It was ritualistic for sure. So it's very, very challenging to get out of that when it's a habit that you've been doing for years.
For sure. Well, and if you're feeling overwhelmed or vulnerable, right? Rituals ground us, right? They're like, okay, it's going to be okay, right?
Something that you can count on.
Right. That's security. But grounding it makes you feel also connected to something, right? Like Elaine Bottom, who is this like philosopher, whatever, he wrote this book called Religion for Atheists. And I actually haven't read it, but Carlos did. And he was talking about, so whether you're religious or not, the church provided a lot of wonderful things for people that have kind of gone by the wayside. And ritual was one of them. And I think that's why sports have become so like obscene in our culture. I mean, I like sports, but they have taken on this importance, right? They're tribal. And then what do people do around it? They eat. It's like the Super Bowl is this huge party now, right? Like the Final Four is this huge party now. Easter brunch, like all like the rituals we do have now. It's almost like because we don't have them on a daily basis, we have to get them in this huge way with other people. And like, and so that's another thing that makes it so hard about food. But yeah, I think it's the ritual. And when you're feeling overwhelmed and vulnerable, it's like, I can depend on this. Like this is what I go to. And so I think, this is a conversation for a different episode, but then you have to get to what is making you feel overwhelmed, what's making you feel vulnerable, What are the ways that you're seeing life that you're actually creating the overwhelm? And that's challenging. That takes a lot of coaching and reflection. But I think once you get physically balanced and then start thinking, okay, this sugar and carb issue is not a logical problem anymore. I can't ask myself, why am I doing this? Or to just stop. I can't say my willpower is going to solve this. I'm not going to not bring it in the house. I tried that. I remember trying that. And then I would just go walk to the store and get it. I was just I remember I was making progress though when I wouldn't walk to get it. I was like, oh wow, this is progress,
Mm-hmm, for sure.
But one of the tools I wanted to give people to start to understand the emotional fulfillment that they're getting from this is to ask them the question, what do I love about this? So instead of being like, why do I do this? Why do I come home every night and sit on the couch and eat? What do I love about it? What do I love about it?
What are some of the responses that you hear from people when you ask that question?
Oh, yeah. Well, it tends to be different for everyone. Some of my clients who do it in that transition time from work to the evening, it's like a chance to catch my breath. It's me time, right? They're so depleted energetically. It actually is an energy issue. They wouldn't think of that on the surface because they're like, I have enough energy, but it's almost like false energy because at least when we first start working together, over caffeinated, using, again, and sugar stimulates us throughout the day if we aren't aware of how much we're eating. And then it's kind of kind of that tired but wired feeling, but they know they have the whole evening ahead of them. So it's kind of a way to regroup. They're using it as a way to what I call restore, right? Restore gives you more energy. So when you go onto social media or TV, you're zoning out. You're not getting anything back from that. But with sugar and carbs, you get energy back. And so we start to try to find.
So what do you think about sugar and carbs and TV combined? Are they canceling each other out?
Good question. I guess it depends on the TV, right?
Bad TV.
Bad TV, yeah. No, that's a great question. It's kind of like a salty sweet. They just cancel each other out. You just coming back for more.
Yeah, that's a fucked up combination, y'all. Careful with that.
Yeah.
I think that people do that. That's like when a lot of people watch TV and they just zone out and that's when they eat. And they're not even connecting to how much they're eating.
Oh, that's the easiest time to zone out because it's just and I think part of that too is so many of my clients have so many rules for themselves during the day, not only around food, but life in general. It's kind of fun to symbolically being like, I don't care. You care, but it's like, I'm not going to follow any rules.
You're just over it at that point. You're like, I just can't do this anymore. And of course you can't. No one's meant to be able to hold it all together like that all day long. That's unrealistic.
Exactly. And that's why you have to figure out how you're creating your own tension during the day because that sugar, another way I use to describe it's almost like a tea kettle. You come home from the day and you're like, and sugar just kind of takes off the tea kettle, like the steamer. So it's like, oh, finally, right? I think people who eat in private, it's largely about shame and not wanting to be seen because maybe they were seen in the wrong ways or they felt invisible during the day. There's many layers to it. I see a lot of my clients who after a social event, then they come home and eat. It's kind of like, oh, I was good. And maybe they didn't have the connection that they wanted or the evening didn't go the way that they wanted. And it's kind of like, oh, I was so good eating and I deserve this because I didn't get what I wanted out of the event. But the challenge with these things is often we've normalized the emotional drought is coming toward. We accept a very low level of emotional fulfillment. And
I like the way you put that.
Oh, thank you.
That resonated with me. It's like, and I don't know, maybe I'm hearing it wrong, but are you saying we are accepting that sugar is the fulfillment? And so very very low grade fulfillment. It's like, really, you want that kind of shitty fulfillment in your life? Sugar?
Yeah, or that temporary, right?
Temporary. And yeah, it's not good enough, everyone. We should have way better fulfillment than that.
Totally. And I think, I meant it that way. And I also meant that I think so many of us expect that, oh, I'm just getting older. This is what it's like life is a drain, or I have 2 kids now. This is what it's like. Right. And we just kind of buy into this narrative that it's all downhill from like, I don't know, your 30th birthday. I mean, whatever it's lower and lower the more, so they can sell more crap to us. Right. But
I know I was at a 30th birthday and all these women some of them were younger than 30 and they were like, oh yeah, I'm going to get Botox. I was like, what the fuck? Botox? How old are you? 28? Like,
wow.
It just made me really sad. I'm like, no one at this table needs any kind of Botox.
I don't know. I just feel like aging is such a privilege. Like a lot of people don't get to do it. But that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
But we're kind of deviating. But I think I meant like emotional, like the level of connection we have with our coworkers or the level of connection we have with our families, or the type of friendships we have. Our society is pretty diseased. I
think a lot of people are afraid to burden others, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to burden them with a phone call, or they're probably busy. But I think everybody is craving that connection. So we need to just kind of let those walls down.
Yeah. Well, and part of why we don't want to quote unquote burden people is often because that means we judge people who need help.
And I know for me, and I know that, connection with people is fulfilling for me, but because I work in a job that is with people all day long and I'm teaching classes and I'm kind of always connecting with people, even if it's on a more superficial level, I tend to stray away from making calls and having more of those, more deep interpersonal connections, especially at the end of my day, because I'm totally depleted from being around people that I actually need to do things that are more calming and introverted. Which sugar, by the way, if we look at it from a Chinese medicine standpoint, yin and yang, sugar is a very yin food. So if you're very young and you're go type A, like everything's like just going a million miles an hour, and then you get home and you're like, you need some yin in your life. And sugar is a fast, easy way to get yin, but it's really just causing more of that energy. It's not actually fixing the problem. So what are some things, Allie, that people can do that are calm if they need calm, and that's what they're getting sugar from? What can they do to give them calm?
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, is that there isn't a formula for this, right? Like you have to do your own exploration. And that's why I think people really sit with that question, what do I love about this? And the answer might not come right away, but just like try it when you're in the moment. What do I love about this? And to Juliette's point, when she was talking about yin and yang are how Chinese medicine evaluates food. They don't look at calories. They look at the energy properties. And our lives as Westerners are very yang. And we need to, life will always balance you out with yin and yang, whether you choose to or not. It's just, they discovered yin and yang by first they noticed it in nature, then they noticed it in the body, then you can notice it. I see it with people's emotional habits. But sugar, alcohol, caffeine are all very yin. So they're very expansive, is basically what that means. And so it gives us that exhale or that reward or that contentment that we're really looking for from the day. If people need calm, I think it's an important word, calm, right? They're not looking for zoning out, which is what TV, social media, all of these things that stimulate us in a way. And I think that's so important to realize there's a difference, because if you want to zone out, that's one thing. But if you're looking for calm, that's why I like the word restoration. Like, what do I need to restore myself? I think it depends. I think everyone's different, but I think some of the things that I know that in one program I did, I sent everyone coloring books and they really liked it. Coloring, because it's meditative, right? There's so many different ways to be meditative. And I think what you're ultimately looking for, what gives you energy back rather than just taking you. Some of my clients love to read fiction. Like that's something that's really restorative for them, because some hate coloring. So that's why like sometimes like giving, answers is hard. I think movement for a lot of people, like yin yoga or stretching, nothing that, not thinking this has to count for exercise, but what's going to restore your body, because a lot of this is physical. It's a physical component, which then emotionally drains us. What about you? What ideas have worked for you? A bath with Epsom salts?
Yeah, definitely a bath. Not as much anymore because I don't have my jacuzzi tub in this apartment. I was really spoiled, and my last apartment had jets, and it made me take a bath every single night, and it was amazing. But now I don't have the jets. I don't know why I don't use it as much. But for me, it's really calm, quiet, nothing. You know what I mean? Even if it's 5 minutes of silence, before I do anything. Like, I just need to take a little break. Even in the middle of my workday, sometimes I'll go into the bathroom and just sit on the toilet and just take some deep breaths and just just don't do anything. How many opportunities do you have where you aren't doing anything?
Well, and I think you bring up that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of us are so used to being stimulated that if
now my clients listening are like, oh, that's why you're in the bathroom that long. I'm sitting there meditating on the toilet.
Well, you have like pounding music going on. Like, I mean,
that's the thing. I'm in an extraordinary situation of stimulation. Like, it's like out of this world,
Yeah, I think a lot of people are stimulated constantly during the day, whether it's through emails or they're running late or dead. It's like multitasking. And I think then if you're not stimulated, it feels like something's wrong. Like, and I think that's important to recognize, like, nothing's wrong.
You're just not used to it. That's all it is. If you can just say, oh, it's just an unfamiliar territory for me, that doesn't mean anything's wrong. Just sit with it for a little while and just notice what happens.
Yeah. And again, I think though, and you bring up an important point in what I work on with my clients is we don't even we look at the evenings, because that can be a really challenging time for people. But we really start like the evening, and I forget what episode we talked about this, but like if you enter the evening with a certain level of depletion, you just aren't going to make the healthy choice. Like, it's just like, and everyone has a different threshold. I use the battery metaphor. Like, some people need to be charged 60% for them to then have a healthy evening. Other people might not only need 20. It's different for everyone. But I think working on this restoration and calmness, or whatever you're craving or rewarding, it has to be throughout the day. It can't be the extreme of depriving myself of reward or meaning and then in the evening. Like, it's really hard not to crack. I think you have to look at the system or like through my lens, I look at the stories that make the day feel like you're so deprived or so stressful or whatever feeling. And again, oftentimes we're contributing to this. And so I think it's really important that part of getting over sugar is actually understanding how much agency, and agency is different than control. Realizing life isn't just happening to you. Like, you have choice. Doesn't mean you can control everything. Yes, we all need health insurance. We all need to pay our bills, right? We can't control unless you hit the lottery or have a trust fund. But like, everyone's life isn't just happening to you. You can, and my clients have found that the most profound changes are in the subtlest ways.
You have the option to not look at social media while you're laying in bed, to not look at your news app when you're, get home from work on the couch. You have these options.
Yeah. And even things that are the subtle is profound. I think we are looking for these big sweeping changes, but one of the things that restores my clients so much is in Truth with Food. We really get into self-compassion. And how do you not beat yourself up for not being perfect with food, for not being perfect in life? And often we're the ones draining. It's like the internal experience is draining us more than what's happening. It's our reaction to it. And so I also just want to offer to people that softening into your life and how you treat yourself can unleash a lot of energy that you then don't feel so deprived and depleted, and like life is a drag and just happening to you. So it's not always something external happening either.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, Allie, because one of the really profound and things that worked for me and shifted my dessert ritual at night was when I finally said to myself, okay, I'm just going to accept that this is what I need every night. And I'm not going to fight it anymore. And I'm going to just enjoy it and accept. It's like, how many years have you been doing it? So you might as well just give in, just ease into it. So it was a beautiful thing. But once I accepted that, there wasn't really the chance for me to go get seconds. It wasn't a frenetic feeling anymore. And then I would have nights where I was like, oh, you know what? I actually don't want that. Because it's like, I can have it though, if I wanted it.
Yeah, the energy around it drives seconds and
the energy. It's the energy, yes.
Yeah, and what you basically described is paradox, which is the central fundamental truth of change. What we resist persists, and what we embrace dissolves. And we just have to like look straight into whatever we're challenged with. We can't run away from it. We can't judge it. And the funny thing is that paradox came out of yin and yang. I mean, that how we know, and that's such a truth, right? So we talked about yin and yang energetics of food, but it's also the energetics of life. And it's just how change happens. And I'm glad that you shared that because that's perfect. I mean, I know, yeah, I too, one thing that's helped me is I struggle with sugar when I'm tired. I never would have thought that, but it really is when I have a certain energy level that's depleted. But anymore, that was kind of like the last hurdle for me. But anymore, the only time I have it is at night after dinner. And what I focused more though on is not as, am I having it? Am I not? Because I do sleep better. I wake up more energized. It really helps my energy. And I feel like my energy is something, like I complain about it or I'm challenged by it a lot. People were like, I never guessed that from you, but I don't have like the energy to take on, like get out in the world as much as I would like, I guess you could say. But I just started looking at more on a continuum. Like, am I decreasing how often I'm having it at night? And that's also work rather than being like every night has to be like, get rid of your little piece of dark chocolate, which some people might be like, oh, please give me a break, but it interferes with my sleep, you know?
Everybody's situation is different.
Yeah. And I've worked really damn hard to get here too. So it's not like I'm like, oh, you know, not that matters, but looking at it on a continuum and it's really worked. Like, I think, you know, Carlos and I went off sugar like in February. He's stuck with it for the most part. He has it here and there, but I'm probably having it now like 3 times a week, which is much better than I was, you know, when we first went off of it. Yeah, I was having it not at all, but like I used to have it every night after dinner. And I've gone through times before where I've never had it, you know, and I've been off of it, but now I'm just like, all right, I'm at about 3 days a week and I'm not even going to measure it, but I'm just, this is where I'm at and yay, you know? So also looking at things not so much as like an everyday thing, but over time, are they getting better? I think is an important thing. So let's wrap this up. I think for people, hopefully you better understand that sugar, which also includes processed carbs, is so much more of a solution than a problem. There's the physical component of it. There's also the emotional component. And first, do a sugar audit. Look for the amount of grams of sugar. 4 grams of sugar equals a packet. Just in what you eat, in the dressings that you use, everything. And just observe for a couple of days, including the weekends, because to Juliet's point, a lot of people go crazy on the weekend, and just become aware. And Juliet, what was the amount you said again that you recommend for your clients?
If it's a salad dressing or a tomato sauce or anything like that, a condiment, less than 5 grams per serving. And then if it's something like crackers or cereal, something like a boxed item, less than 10 grams of sugar per serving. That also includes yogurt and all of that.
Yeah. So, you know, as you start to upgrade there, actually a study came out this week that people who focus on adding in healthier foods rather than cutting out their favorite foods do much better. So crowd out, and your taste buds will change. So do a sugar audit, then, you know, start to upgrade to things that have maple syrup and honey and use your own, make your own kind of stuff and coconut sugar. And then really ask yourself, what do I love about indulging in carbs when, right? Maybe it's in private. Maybe it's at night. Maybe it's at social events. What do I love about this? Rather than trying to think, why do I do this? Like, there is a reason for it, and start to unpack that and have self-compassion as you start to, because there will be multiple layers. It's never one thing. That's it. That's a hot coaching tip. I hope that doesn't overwhelm people. All right. Anything else, Juliet?
No, this was very informative.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you so much for listening to the Insatiable podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can connect with us on social media. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Juliet Unite and Allie at Allie M. Shapiro. M stands for Marie. Please feel free to also email us any questions. We would love to hear from all our listeners. You can reach us at Allie at allieshapiro.com and Juliet at unitefitness.com. We'll see you next time.